Cool. Okay. So just waiting a second for other people to show up. I think we're expecting maybe 2 more people. I think Letitia just joined, which is exciting. And then I think maybe Steve and Tom we're hoping to have. So we'll just wait like 2 or 3 more minutes. Sem is here. That's awesome. Everybody, as you're joining, just be sure to look in the Etherpad and make notes. Danielle is here. Great. Tian is here. Hello. So I think the only person we're still waiting for is Steve. We'll just give him like another minute or 2, and then we'll get started. Hi, Tian. Yay. So exciting to see so many faces on this call. Really excited to have past fellows from our inaugural round of fellowships. Christy is here. And then our new fellows, Tian and Danielle, are here. So exciting to see you guys. And good to see Madeline and Sarah also. Okay, so Steve is here, and I think we will just get started. Everybody, please put your name in the Etherpad.
I think I accidentally declined Steve. I meant to hit allow. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Did you decline Steve?
I did.
I was hitting allow. Oh no.
Well, it says on the right that he wasn't allowed to join. It was totally my fault.
How can you fix this? How can we fix this?
Let me
Okay, you know what we'll do is we'll add Steve. Wait, Van. No, I don't know if I have his email address offhand.
I have it.
Okay, if you can add him directly to the call.
Okay.
On the side. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait while Steve is returning to the call. Okay. Great. So we're just going to do some really quick intros and updates to get started, and we can do that before Steve gets here. So just your name, location, if there's anything new with you, and then I have copied and pasted the goals that you said you were going to do last week under line 23. So please update us on your goals. And I'm seeing that Viggy is there. I don't know if David is here today. And then the OSU, I think then that would be, I don't know. Steve is here. So anyway, if you're here last week and you have a goal you want to talk about, please update us on your goal. Say hello and update us on your goal. Viggy, do you want to start?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
We can hear you.
Sorry, my webcam isn't working. So I have been documenting a couple of interesting stuff that I have been doing in my study group. I'm just posting the link over there. So right now it's not there yet. I'm just starting to document it. There are a couple of pages over there, which is talks about what IoT is and what are the basic kind of programs that you need to organize for your study group to start learning the kind of technologies behind IoT products and prototypes, and how to get mentors and how to start learning in a collaborative manner. And there are a few activity ideas in those pages, and a few ways of reproducing research using Jupyter notebooks. So it's not there yet. I'm just started to document it, not that put it in a very consumer manner, maybe like code snippets and things like that, more videos. So we're still working on it. So by end of this year, we are planning to have a complete playlist of a few Raspberry Pi hacks and making some Docker containers in cloud so that people can host their applications, gather some temperature sensor data, put it on a dashboard using Python and some visualization like Deeply, and then host that application in some cloud. So that you want a complete end-to-end, a kind of a deployment, IoT deployment, so that study groups can do some really, can hack it and do some really crazy activities over that. So that document, the link to the document is somewhat, how to get started. There's a lot more to add. Yeah, that's pretty much from my side.
This is so great to see. What an awesome piece of work. And it looks like it's going to be really useful for lots of other people in our community. So Steph is giving the sparkle fingers, which is a Mozilla thing for like, yes, we're excited on a conference call when you don't want to make a lot of noise. So sparkle fingers all around. Steve, did you put a goal in for last week? I think that you're up there. But if not, just check in.
Yeah, I put in a goal, but I didn't. I mean, whatever, Thanksgiving and all that. But
Oh,
yeah,
right.
we have a person I think who's going to run probably a 2-part Git workshop for us. He's a local material science faculty member, and then I think we're probably shooting for early January to make that happen. So soon enough.
That is great news. Awesome. Good progress. Let's see. Who else dropped in a goal? I don't think David is here today. And looking at the color coding, I think that is everybody for right now. So just to let you, the newcomers, because I think there's a couple newer people on this call, know that we've been doing this goal setting exercise every week. And at the very bottom of the section on the Etherpad for the call today, there is a section for your goal for next week. And next week is the last week we're going to meet. Some of us will be joining you from a different time zone. A bunch of us Mosleans are going to be out in Hawaii for the call. And so we'll be joining you very early in the morning or on the other call very late at night. But we want to know what goals you are, what your goal is for next week. So drop that in at the very bottom of today's call. And then let's just go on ahead and start talking about some of this Open Science 101 stuff. So you would have seen, if you read the study group materials for this week, in section 4 of the study group handbook, we tried to give you a pretty good idea, a good outline, a basis for what Open Science is and what's going on. And so wanted to talk about in a little more depth with some special guests about a couple of those projects and sections. So we're going to start with Christy, who created a course that encourages collaboration between graduate students. And you all should have watched her video. And I think hopefully she's going to give us some updates and maybe can answer some questions about what that collaborative process was like in her course. So take it away, Christy.
The idea of open science into their minds without really telling them it's open science to begin with, because that tends to put up people's backs very early on. So we come at this we are increasing your efficiency with technology, we're increasing your ability to collaborate with each other, and we're going to increase your ability to handle your data. And so it started out as the Open Science and Reproducible Research course and has become the reproducible quantitative methods course, which seems to fit a lot better with more conservative university administrators' opinions of what a course like this should be. The content has not changed, pretty stupidly. So I did the first offering of this course in spring of 2016 to 6 graduate students. And so we gave them a real data set and they worked through it and they documented the data, they did the analysis and they wrote a paper on it. And as of this morning, I got the proofs of the manuscript that's been accepted and we're going to have it out next week. So yay! Also successful, so we managed to get the attention of Science Magazine when we published our preprint. That was really exciting, and that also very much helped with the university administrators taking up this course. And so I managed to get funding to teach this course for next semester. And so my goal with this is scaling it up. So the first offering was 6 graduate students, and that's not necessarily the most efficient way to reach a large group of people. So I capped it at 25. We've got 17, I think, signed up as of this morning. And the idea is to have 3 or 4 concurrent projects going on in the class. And so a little less hand-holding with the actual development of the code, but essentially trying to get the students to be able to independently do the same thing in a collaborative group that is very much like a lab with a bit of training wheels on, and just making sure that they're using best practices all the way through. And I want you guys to teach this course too. So we created a handbook with Savannah and Steph this summer. And it's got a few little bits of things that could use a little bit more development, but I think that it's a good working document for starting out your own course. So yeah, so it's linked in my description there. But yeah, feel free to pull requests if you see any errors, because there's probably a few typos and that sort of thing in there. Fork it and teach it. It's right now it's an instructor-facing guide, but with a few little tweaks, it could be a student-facing course website. So please use that too. Yeah, I think that's really about it. Any questions?
Christy, oh, whoops. Christy, I don't see any questions in the pad, but I am curious to know what parts of collaboration were most challenging for your students when they were getting together to work on this project?
Well, so trying to find a platform for collaborative writing that worked for everyone was a real challenge. Almost everyone is used to the Word environment and then track changes. And also, different students had various levels of comfort in composing things and publishing them immediately online. So we found that some students did sort of lead in that aspect, and some kind of trailed a little bit behind. But you know, if we nudged everyone, they all came along. And I will admit, at the end, when we were trying to format up the final document, we just ended up taking it out of our collaborative software. We used Overleaf, and ended up getting a group Dropbox and putting a Word document in it. I'm so sorry. It's so embarrassing. But we found that we couldn't get the referencing software to work for all of us collectively in Overleaf's environment. So we had to do the final formatting and final editing in Word.
Mm-hmm. And Christy, I know you ran this course as an official offering in the catalog at MSU. Is there, but I want to point out, and I think when we developed the guide, it is possible for study groups just to pick up and run through the lessons themselves without it being like an official course that's taught. I mean, I feel like we prepared the materials in that way. I just that's not really a question, but just more of a comment. Like, I think this is a great resource for study groups. And if you're thinking about like starting a study group, but you don't really know if you have enough expertise to necessarily teach it, or you don't know what your full semester long lesson plan would be for the study groups, like how I'm going to fill all that time. Christy's course is out there as potentially a curriculum for study groups for a full semester. And I think that Christy is probably fairly available to answer questions about the course.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Christy. We're going to move on and go ahead.
So I just had a quick logistical question for Christy about the course. I was wondering, with a group of 17, are you planning to take on like a teaching assistant, or like divide the students into groups with leaders to manage multiple projects? Because that does seem a little more, I don't know, intense.
So I've been lucky enough to have, I think it's 3 postdocs have sort of signed on because they want to take the course, but they can't take it as an official offering. So they have all published before. They all have a little bit of understanding of open publishing frameworks. So they're going to take on leadership roles to some groups.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So it seems that we can sort of capitalize on that. Actually, an established professor also wants to sit in on it. So she's donated some of the data from her group, and she's interested in sitting in. And I don't know what level of participation she plans to have in the groups, but I think that'll be a really interesting dynamic too.
Cool.
So
Great.
exciting. Steph, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the open data training that resources that Mozilla offers?
Sure. So I'm wondering if I should do a screen share at this point. What are your thoughts, Anna? Just because I'm really planning on going through. All good? Okay. So pardon me all while I take over your screens and figure out how to do the screen share in Hangout. 1 sec. Bear with me. All right, screen share. Little window keeps going away. Okay. Here we go. Can everybody see my screen now? Okay. I can't see what you're seeing. All I see is Xana. How weird. All right. So I'm going to go forward and assume that you are seeing what I'm seeing. So we have had, as many of you may or may not know, I was originally hired to develop an open data training program. And what I'm showing you here is kind of what's come out of that work. And we've had so much help. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. We've had all these wonderful contributors. We actually had this, the Open Data Training Program up as a project for the Global Sprint in June. And we had all these wonderful folks down listed on the bottom who helped contribute to this. And what's come out of it are kind of 2 pieces of this training program. The first piece is the primers, which we'll look at here in a minute, which is text-based. It's in a Git book format, available for people to go through and kind of self-learn on their own. The second piece are the instructor guides, which are designed to provide a guide for folks to teach other people about open data. And it's based off the primer, so it's a lot of the same content, but the instructor guides have more in the way of activities and interaction. So I'm going to start first by clicking on the primers. And here you see we've got the Git book format. In true Mozilla fashion, we have this up and live, and it's not complete yet. But you can look on the left-hand side under the table of contents and see what we're planning to put, what our outline is. All the stuff that's in black is the stuff that's completed and up in the primer format. We have our introduction here, and you can just click on the different sections, and it talks about, my apologies. And it talks about different aspects of the first primer, which is on why open data. We talk about challenges to open data. I have the first intro for primer 2 there. I haven't put in the remaining pieces of primer 2 yet because it involves uploading images, and I just haven't done that yet. But Xana and I, with the help of others, have created what I think is a really great set of primers that brings real life experiences into teaching open data. And I would totally love everybody's feedback and thoughts on that. If I go back to the first link, the main open data training program repository, we have information there on how you can contribute, and I believe we do. Do I not? I took out the how to contribute piece. Oh, it's under contributing. I'll link to the contributing back after we're done here. My bad. So sorry, folks. All right. The second piece is the instructor guides, and so let's take a look at those. These are also in GitHub, and they're in a GH Pages format. We have them broken down into 3 different levels. We have the basics. So why open data, how to open your data. You see they're the exact same titles as you saw in the primers. We, again, only have instructor guide 1 complete, but we're going to click on that, and here's what the instructor guides look like. We have an intro, tells you what level people need to be at in order to complete this, this session. Student prerequisites, what the learning objectives are. You'll see the outline as well as some links to the case studies that we have here. We have exercises. We tell you how long it's going to take, and you can just work through. You can take this and hack on it depending on who your audience is. Use this as a guide for training other people on how to do open data training or open data. So this is for you to train other people on how to do open data. All right, and now I'm gonna stop sharing at this point so that I can see faces. All right. So that's my preliminary introduction to this. Are there any questions at this point? Feel free to verbalize too. You can put them in the Etherpad or verbalize because I'm gonna shut up now.
Steph, thank you so much for that. I was remiss in not introducing Steph because she's new on this call. Steph is my boss, and she's the program lead for science, the science lab. She was, and she was open data training lead until just this past summer, and then she became our program lead. So super excited to have her, and really excited to have her working on this project. And I do want to say. Yeah, it's true. In Mozilla Fashion, we only have a few of the modules currently up there, and we're going to be adding more as we go. But this also means there's an opportunity for you guys to look at the modules, contribute, and see what's there and see what you like. And again, the first set are very general, just introducing people to open data, like why you would do it. And we do give some real concrete real-world examples of where it's been effective in science and research practice. Any questions for Steph? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, is there one?
We got a couple coming in
oh,
the
great.
Etherpad, but I'm going to go ahead and answer them there. And the other thing that I do want to say, sorry, not to completely interrupt you, Xander. I've been able to actually demo this at a couple librarian conferences, and I'm thrilled to see some library folks here. And basically what I've been hearing from them is they see this as an opportunity to really get graduate students engaged and interested who might not know about open data and its relevance to their graduate work. So really excited and would love to hear thoughts maybe in the Etherpad on where you think this might be useful. So now I'll be quiet.
Great. Okay, so next I believe is Tian. Tian is one of our Mozilla Fellows for Science this year, and Tian is at Stanford University. And I'll just let you take it away, Tian, and talk more about open science and your practice, and we're so excited to have you.
Hi, everyone. So I just finished my PhD at NYU, and essentially what got me through my PhD is my contributions to open source projects. So when I first joined the lab, there weren't really great protocols for explaining the different types of ways to analyze the data. I worked mostly in brain imaging data using MEG techniques. And there was a lot of tribal knowledge that a lot of the graduate students had, but it wasn't documented anywhere. So I'll have to go to each person and ask, like, hey, do you know how to do such and such? They're like, oh yeah, just do it like this. And I'm like, okay, this isn't written in any protocol. So over the winter break, I made a list of all the things that we needed in our lab in order to have a very transparent and clear pipeline from when you acquire the data and to when you start to do your analysis. And analysis will be person-to-person dependent. And I talked to an open source community, which is MNE Python, which is a data analysis package for MEG data, EEG data, ECOG data, which are the electrodes that patients have when they're going through epileptic surgeries, and also like NIRS, which is like a different type of brain imaging. So what we did was outline how to take our data format from our system and incorporate it into this open source package, document it all the way, and create a new online guide for anyone using our system. So we took all of the resources that was collectively dispersed over people who were either graduating or had just recently left, and I cobbled it all together, and now we have it in the package. So it's now maintained by a community of researchers, scientists, engineers, all the people who have a vested interest in making sure that this is well documented and passed on for future researchers to use. So open source projects really maintain the life of a lot of core tools that are used by researchers. So when a young scientist comes into, say, a new lab, they now have resources online that they can also refer to, as well as like their internal lab protocol. So let me just go through the few points I made on the Etherpad. It provides an online resource tools. It develops this community, which is great because you have other people to ask analysis questions to. Those questions that you may not have expertise in, and those in your lab or your university may not specialize in, which was the case for when I started to do new projects of like incorporating different types of modalities together. It promotes validated code. So with open source projects, we usually use a peer review process where everyone looks at the code the similar way that you would have like peer reviews for articles that you're publishing. So it maintains that your code has great integrity, it checks for logic and the flow of the code, and it tries to maintain a standard so that we're all using proper like standardized tools. And it helps develop your coding skills, which is great. I hadn't used Python when I was almost starting grad school, and I learned how to use Python from it. Um, and it allows for you to gain skills in reviewing other people's code, which is useful for scientists when you want to, say, redo a type of analysis that someone has done. You can easily follow their train of thought. And it promotes good practices and encourages code sharing. So I think that's all I have for now.
All right, Tian, you have a question in Etherpad asking if you feel like you're getting proper credit for these non-publication elements of your work. Which is a great question.
That's the question. So I recently just had an interview from one of our fellows, Bruno, and I started to speak on this. I don't think that proper credit has been given to open source projects as much as they should. Usually there's like a major paper that's released by open source projects, but this happens like every like say 3 to 5 years, and it's when there's like major improvements to the package. So during this time, you can have like no publications that is related to a project that you've been contributing to for years. So it would be great if there were like new metrics that you can start to incorporate in, say, your CV or some type of citation that can show like your due credit to projects, because academic software is very useful. Everyone uses it, and it's like a very thankless thing to do development for. So I think now, since I've been in the project longer, I have gotten credit for it. I've been included on like the paper that we've submitted for it, and also the posters that we give at different conferences, and also for workshops that I put on. We should develop, as a community, we should develop more metrics to give scientists and researchers their due credit for their open source contribution.
Yeah, this is Steve. I asked that question. We recently here at Oregon State University Libraries revised our scholarship guidelines for tenure and promotion to try to include more non-peer-reviewed publication elements of someone's work. We've had a few people who've kind of escaped from the process by way of leaving the organization because
they were in a position where they were doing software development as their primary scholarly work, and they weren't getting enough credit for it. But I'd be happy to share what those scholarship guidelines look like.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I would like to see that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Steve, because I would love to see that, and I know that there's some other folks that would also love to see that.
Yeah, I'll find a way to get that out there to everyone. Maybe I'll just stick a link to it.
Perfect.
I know that this has been a discussion in a few departments, especially like with the emergent like data science department. They're trying to prevent the whole academic brain drain of like their very skilled data scientists and like programmers to industry, because first academic departments typically and traditionally haven't given the due credit that we were just mentioning, and they don't see what they do as valuable and as a job security thing. So it's good that there has been like some momentum behind like adding like this into like your academic repertoire.
Tion, I had a quick question about code review. When you do code review, what is the process for that? Is it more informal with your lab mates, or do you bring in people from outside of your working groups to help with the code review?
For code review, I use code review a lot with the open source project, and with the community that I'm involved with. There's like some standard like code review practices that's used like with NumPy and SciPy and like scikit-learn, where you you have to have at least 2 of the core members of a project give approval for the code, and usually they just go through the code and they try to make sure like you have like good naming conventions, that everything has unit tests, and there's like a list of things. And for MNE Python, we actually have a list of things that we look for with the code review, so that we can try to have like a very transparent way of expressing the things that we would like as contributions to our package. So that's typically what I do when I'm like reviewing code for the projects that I work on. And within the lab, there hasn't been much internal code review, and that's unfortunate because this is where you are doing your data analysis for your research project, and if no one's looking over your code, you could have a very spurious result that could just be because there's a bug in your code.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that's something that I think we are planning to expand some of our materials on code review. At Mozilla Science Lab, that's something that we're looking at to encourage people to do code review with each other. And I just want to recommend that if people are working in study groups and are bringing code to study groups, the code that they're working on for their own research projects, that study groups are a good place for people to kind of get together and look at each other's code in an informal, casual way just to check that over. So study groups are potentially a setting for code review that's outside of an open project contribution structure, and we're going to be trying to create some materials to support that. Steph, are there any more questions in the pad?
There is. There's
Okay.
one more question. Has the rest of your lab adopted these habits and skills as well, and how did it spread among the lab?
That's actually a great question. So it was met with a lot of resistance and intrepidation. So when I started grad school, there was another colleague of mine who actually introduced me to the package that I used. So he and we both started contributing to this open source project, and our advisors really saw it as like time away from our research. They didn't really appreciate what we were doing until they realized that, oh, well, they got a publication out of it. Oh, people are starting to refer to NYU as like a resource for this open source project because our logo is now on the project. Oh, their colleagues see that their name is on the list of contributors when you see releases for the software, so they can say, hey, this is my graduate student, I'm also working on this. So at the beginning, it was seen as like extracurricular versus actual core to like my research program. But now it's been met with like very positive reception. But it took a while. And what happened is that we used this code, and one of the researchers in our group really stuck to using this click GUI software that was very much a black box, and it was very hard to try to reproduce the same code because there's no trace of what a person had done in their analysis. So after going through and seeing that other researchers within the lab couldn't do exactly what they did, they started to go to a programmatic way. And this required us like retraining the entire lab. But that it basically took my whole PhD to get the two labs to use this software.
I just want to point out something that Steve's putting in the Etherpad right now that kind of goes back to that. He mentions that as a coordinator of a community level development work, he has found it helpful to send a letter of appreciation to the participants in a sprint. This is so key because, as Tian was mentioning, it's as he was starting to get credit and recognition for what they were doing, it was seen as less extracurricular and more of, hey, this is core. So as a leader of a project, if you can provide that recognition and that feedback that they can then use in their tenure and promotion or put in their employee file, that is a great way to spread the ethos of open science work.
Yeah, and it also offers more of an incremental bit of evidence of the work and appreciation of the work that you're doing, right? If you have to wait until a new release or a paper is written about that project, then you're waiting oftentimes, a year or more, maybe, or even if it's months. And if your supervisor or your colleagues are saying, what have you been doing the last 6 weeks? You can point to that thing and say, I worked with these other people at these other institutions, and we did these, very, very explicit things. It's pretty helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much for those comments. I want to move on to make sure we have time for discussion at the end, and I think maybe some of these points will come back during the discussion. But Danielle Robertson is here from Ohio State Health University. Is that right, Danielle?
No.
Oh, I'm not Ohio, Oregon. Sorry.
Not Ohio.
Oregon, that's what I meant to say. Oregon. I saw the OH. I do know Danielle is from the West Coast. Sorry, I misspoke there. So Danielle, do you want to just introduce yourself and talk about sort of how you bring open science, how newer researchers can incorporate open science into their practice?
Sure. So, I'm a Mozilla Fellow for Science this year, and I'm also defending my PhD on Monday. Oh God, I still feel like it could all go wrong. I've heard that that's normal, but documents in, so I'm just writing the talk. My experience in open science, I work in cell biology, neuroscience, so it's small N data, it's wet lab science work. And I have never worked for a supervisor who was at all interested in sharing data. And so I think that perspective is valuable because even as Tian said, and he's in a much more computational field, he got resistance, bringing in workflows that were only going to make things more efficient. So trying to understand, deeply understanding the perspective of the supervisors and trying to work with that, I think is part of something that early career students and researchers we need to do it. And with the idea, something that I've heard from people is like, oh yeah, I'm interested in open science and I'm gonna do that when I run my own lab. But my perspective is that is too late because by the time you run your own lab, you've bought into the existing system for like 15 years. So the time to learn the processes is now. even if you don't have full control of your data, and even if your advisors or collaborators are uncomfortable with data sharing or outright against it, and even if your advisors and collaborators demand that you submit your work to a high impact and maybe closed access journal. So something that another fellow and I put the link in Etherpad, Kirsty, have been working on is this thing called Open Advice. And so if you go to the Etherpad and click on line 85, you can see our draft website. And we worked on this at OpenCon this year, and we got contributions from librarians and other researchers who had specific questions and or specific answers. So for example, if you go to Open Advice, the first one is, what do I do if I don't have sole ownership of my research data? And maybe you can't share your data, you can't put your data up on a repository, but there are things that you can do. You may be able to post analysis code and learn how to work and how to do your analysis in an open source platform and produce, say, like a R Markdown or use Knitter to explain the code that you did and what exactly you did to your data. So by improving your own personal data management and workflow pipeline, you can start to demonstrate, as Tion did, like the value of this to your supervisors, and you can just make sure that you're doing your own due diligence so that you could share your data if you wanted to. So yeah, so we would love to get contributions to Open Advice. If you have specific questions that, or even like hypothetical questions that you've dealt with or that you haven't dealt with but you thought up, you can just add the question, and then we have a community of people from OpenCon who are helping us to answer them, or you can pop on and answer a question. So I'm hoping that this will be a valuable resource for people like me 2 years ago who was interested in open science, but I was like, oh damn, all those papers I published before I knew about the open access movement, now the license prohibits me from publishing them, so what can I do? Yeah, so that's sort of what I'm working on in this area. So any feedback on that site or any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You're getting love in the Etherpad, Danielle.
Yay! Yes. E to the 100. All right. Yeah. So the development of the site at OpenCon was pretty good too. I just want to throw that out there. Like that was a cool experience for me to sort of come with the bare bones and just work for 3 hours and develop a site. And now there it is, and we can continue adding to it. But yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that like you do face cultural resistance, and like don't spend your time on this type of resistance. And I just had a PI yesterday, my own boss, was like, hey Danielle, have you heard of BioArchive? What do you think of that? He's like, he's like, I don't think it's worth my time. And but so they're thinking about these things, and I got to be like, oh, well, here are the reasons. Remember that last paper that you had that took 3 years from when it was written to when it was actually published? It would have been, you could have put it up on BioArchive because it really like barely changed at all. It just took 3 years, and stake your claim. Sometimes you have to put it in terms that matter to them, right? And so for my boss, not getting scooped matters. So BioArchive is a way to stake your claim on the intellectual output and say, we made that knockout mouse. Anyway, so yeah, I feel like I exist in a world where like I have not actually been able to make my lab be open, but at least they're talking about these things and asking me about them. So that's good. So I can feed them the correct information. So yeah, any questions? Oh, just only love. That's so nice. Well, we would love if you are working with, if you've worked with people or you know people who don't who are experiencing like, oh, here's this specific thing I want to do. I think really specific questions are fine for open advice because that stuff is important. It's important to get into the details a little bit of like, okay, I really want to, share this code, but I have one collaborator. We have a good community that we can access to find answers to whatever specific questions people that might have. So please get in touch.
Danielle, thanks so much for that. And it's a really good segue into our little discussion section. I think we'll spend about 5 or 10 minutes on this. And maybe what we'll do first is just a couple minutes of silent ether padding. So there's a list of questions under line 94. How is open science viewed at your institution and your lab? What practices might be easily adopted? What are your biggest blockers for adopting those practices? What could help? And then what are the challenges you often hear to open practice? What are your own concerns or hesitations? And I think, if you're new to the open science world, there are real concerns and hesitations that people have about what does it mean to put my data out there? How will it be used? What does it mean to, not publish in this much higher profile journal and do an open access publication instead? So I think I would love for people just to spend probably about 2 minutes in the Etherpad, and everybody is welcome to type in there under those lines, any of the questions you want to answer, and then we'll just have a little discussion and maybe brainstorm some responses. And particularly, it's always fun to record some of the challenges that you've heard or pushback that you've gotten from others when you suggest open science, and it's sort of fun as a group to come up together with responses to those. So let's just do that for about 2 minutes of silent ether padding.
There's some great stuff going on in this pad. I'm impressed, y'all.
Yeah, this looks great. So I think I don't want to stop the flood, the rainbow flood in the pad. But a question that popped to mind that I thought maybe some people could respond to, and we'll open up the floor for discussion, but I think it was Madeline that asked, like, when to go open. Madeline, do you want to verbalize your question? I don't know.
Sure.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, it took me a while to find the button. Yeah, so basically I find myself, I'm doing my stuff and I'm like writing my test code and just kind of fiddling around. And it's all just, on my local machine or whatever. And I think to myself, oh yeah, it'd be really cool to have this all be like on GitHub somewhere, like have my whole analysis, whatever workflow. But I'm not sure if I should be already posting everything on GitHub from the beginning, if that would be the easiest way to do it, or if there's a point in the process where it makes sense to kind of publish your code or publish your data. So yeah, feedback on that.
Tian or Christy, do you guys have thoughts on that?
Well, I've recently started a radically open workflow where everything immediately goes on to GitHub. Like even as I'm starting to comment out some notes about what I'm planning for code, that I make a repo for it and I start building it in GitHub. And so far it's been pretty positive. I seem to freak a lot of people out when I talk about it. Like even in my lab where I was hired to open the lab, essentially. The grad students are like, wait, what? No, what? Okay, so if you got hit by a bus, you can pick up your work. You're expendable. You're expendable. is usually the take on it. But yeah, so far it's so good. It helps me stake claims on the ideas that I'm developing too. It kind of bypasses the Darwin Wallace type situation by saying, yeah, I'm already thinking about breakpoint analysis for some guys. Gives you a date stamp. So it's a nice thing to have. And also then you don't have to worry about making sure that you've put in everything else that you need to put up because it's already there.
I noticed sort of along those lines another question in the pad. And this, Christy, your response brought this to mind, and I'm not sure who this is in the light gray color. Looks like it's Steve. That people are saying, well, we're already doing open. And it sounds like, Christy, you're offering a much more radical perspective on open. Steve, do you want to verbalize your question? And maybe we can have a little discussion about it. Steve, are you there? Let's see if Steve is still there.
I am here.
Great, thank you.
I lost. I don't know what happened.
I was hoping you could just, yeah, I was hoping you could just verbalize your question really quick about people who already think they're doing open.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I talked to people a fair bit from kind of a research data management perspective in the library or just like casually at a party or something. And I'll start talking about open science things or data management things. There's some kind of overlappiness there. And very often people say, oh, I'm already doing a great job at that. And then you start to dig a little bit deeper and, they don't share their data. There's no documentation for what they're doing. If they share data, they're not sharing code. Everything is just totally closed down. And so there's a sense maybe that if things are sort of, if the machine of their lab is moving along smoothly, that's as open as it needs to be, maybe. I'm not quite sure exactly where that perspective that they're doing things well enough is coming from, but it's almost like there's a defensive response to the question of, are you open? Are you doing open enough? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Tian, or do you have a response to this one?
yeah, I know a lot of times people are like, well, I want to make sure my code is pretty and like well documented and all of that before they'll share it, and they just try to be such a perfectionist with what they're producing now that they never actually get to a point where they share it. So because they're like, oh, I'll come back to this like once I'm done writing the paper up, or once the paper is accepted, or once I start this next project, I'll go back to it, and that's perfectionist the enemy.
Anyone else? Danielle, do you have any comments on this? We're already doing it.
Hold on, let me. I'm muted. Hello, hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. I think my computer's threatening to die, of course. Yeah, I think that's something that I hear, but then that same group of people, I mean, I think I disagree with Steve. Sometimes people think they're doing a little bit, or they've like talked about it once, but they're not actually sort of changing the way that their lab works systemically. So just, I don't know. The one thing I've mentioned in the pad is just researchers really think that they have no time. And it's, it's kind of true. The pressures on their time are high. And so it's sort of demonstrating like what Tion did, how much time is saved through developing new standards or new workflows, or better data management makes it so easy when a postdoc leaves the lab, for example, I think can help people like take it to the next level and really implement a system rather than giving it a little bit of lip service, but not having a full change.
Right. I wonder too, I think like what the approach that we've taken at Mozilla Science Lab is to target early career researchers with our materials on open science and study groups and the fellowships. So we're looking at people who are coming into labs now and rising up. But Steve, it sounds like you're also talking to people on the PI level or people who are running labs, and those people maybe think that they know what open is, but don't quite know. And they may or may not be listening carefully to newer researchers, younger researchers in their labs who are proposing new strategies. So I wonder, and this is a question for Steve and other librarians on the call and also the rest of you, do you think that there's room for some kind of education program, or people would be receptive to some kind of education program aimed at PIs or later career researchers about some of these topics, and how could that be gently floated?
So I think one of the things that we've been talking about here at OSU a lot around this is so you get people who've been doing research for 20 years, and it's like they're almost too calcified to change, right? So you have that problem, and then you have early career people who have just in their first assistant professor position, and doing, unless they're really brave in some ways, doing open is a risky thing for them, because if they don't know if they're going to get credit for what they're doing, or if somehow it rocks the boat, then they may perceive that their promotion and tenure is at risk. And so we've been wondering whether there's this like sweet spot of people who've just gotten tenure, who are new enough at the process of being a scientist and running a lab, that they're not inflexible, but that looming risk of doing something different is no longer there. Right, and so could you find people who've just passed that, who've just gone to associate, and target them as people to say, hey, let's talk about making some changes here and see what happens. So that's a direction that we're probably going to head in the next year here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be interested to hear what folks think about that.
Any thoughts or comments on any of that from the rest of the group? It sounds great to me. I know we've sort of talked about how to make this work more effective by talking to the right people. Anyone else want to chime in?
Oh, I would just want to chime in and totally agree with that. The end of that conversation with my boss yesterday about BioArchive was just him talking about, he's an assistant professor who doesn't have tenure, and they're really desperate to get the publications and to get the currency that matters for the grants and promotions that they want. So trying to, I think, putting things like BioArchive or data sharing, or even just use of open tools in terms that make sense to them, like improvement in efficiency, better lab transitions, is a good entry point. Rather than like make all your data open, because sometimes they're not going to go for that. It is risky for them, and I think we have to be empathetic to their struggle. I think there is a whole class of people who would potentially be interested in offerings for faculty.
Mm-hmm. Great, that's great to hear. So we're out of time for today. I'm so excited and looking at this amazing, beautiful Etherpad. I encourage you guys all to look at the stuff from line 94 down, and hopefully these discussions can continue. You're all invited to join the study group Gitter chat and keep talking there. And finally, just a reminder on line 132, there's goal setting for next week. Next week is going to be our last meeting, and we're going to be talking about growing your study groups and thinking about community. And so looking forward to seeing you there. And then please, new study group leads, put your goals in there, and we'll talk about them for next week. And I want to thank all our guests today. It was so exciting to have such a awesome panel discussion. And so Danielle, Christy, Tian, Steph, thank you so much for coming, and thanks for all the past study group leads for coming and showing up and chiming in. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much. Bye.